I'm so excited to introduce you to the best website designers out there. We have a brand new partnership with Session Sites. It is where good therapy meets brilliant design, and they get your website switched over or built in less than 2 weeks. They fine tune your messaging, use science backed user experience methodology, and work exclusively with mental health professionals. In fact, new clients right now are going to get 3 free therapy marketing strategy calls with their creative director of Session Sites if you book today. You're not going to want to miss this. Head on over to sessionsites.com/Joe. Again, that's sessionsites.com/Joe. Get the website of your dreams today. Sessionsites.com/Joe. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1186. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. We have been talking about how to have a brighter brain. We've talked about how to focus on what's important. We've talked about how operations in your business help you free up bandwidth. We've talked about trauma. And today we're talking about language. We're talking about how does language impact the way that we view the world? How does it make us think differently? It's just interesting as we think about language. There's words in the English language that we don't have words for. We don't have a word for a group of flowers. So we had to borrow that from the French. So bouquet. There's all these things in our language that feel very normal to us, but maybe we've never really stepped back to analyze it. So that's why I'm so excited today. We have Cary Prejean, who is on the show. Cary is a awesome entrepreneur, person that brings expertise from diverse disciplines of accounting, finance, the ontology of language, and predictive index to guide business owners in scaling their business to the next level. Cary, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Glad to be here, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I am so excited to have you. Now, before we got rolling, we were talking about language, and I just said, "Stop! That's so good. Let's just save that for the show." How did you get into thinking about language and the way that it impacts the way people relate with each other?
Well, it goes back to some training that I did back in 1987. It was a weekend course, and basically it introduced me to the discipline called the ontology of language, which was, I guess, I don't want to say invented, but developed by a gentleman by the name of Fernando Flores out of Chile. Really brilliant guy. And what the discipline it has some basic claims. It says that, number one, we're linguistic beings on top of being biological beings, and that's what makes us human beings rather than just Homo sapiens. Another claim is that language is generative. Your language generates your reality. It also generates the future. Or let me say it this way. Nothing happens for humans unless it happens in language first. Even if it's just a thought to yourself. When you started this podcast, you just didn't do the podcast and a few episodes in say, hey, I think I'll have a podcast. No, you had the thought of, I'm going to start a podcast happen first, and then the action followed. If that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say language is used to, and you say, okay, well, some animals have language. Yeah, they language in that they coordinate action with different sounds and motions. Wolves will coordinate an attack. They language. Coco the gorilla had 900 word vocabulary, but animals don't live immersed in language like we do, and they can't really coordinate the future, which humans do well. The fact that we're here today on this podcast happened in the past, but it happened in language that we communicated, as an offer to show up and accepted. So here we are. This future was invented in the past. In fact, most of the future for human beings is invented in the now or somewhere in the past that shows up because of what happened, some conversation you had either with yourself or with other parties that generates that reality.
Yeah. Now, you were even saying before we started rolling, how you and I, in many ways are alike. And then you kind of start to dig into the differences and how that would impact our language. Not that we have to recreate that full conversation we were having, but maybe kind of dig into what kind of those concepts were.
Yeah. Well, So people, people think that a lot of stuff, quote, happens to them, that other people hurt their feelings, that other people make them feel sad or angry, like you did this to me. And really, all those emotions live inside of our language, and they're just waiting to be triggered by some perturbation. Something happens, and our narrative tells us such and such happened. Somebody's doing it to you. That's you should be sad about this. They did it to you, and they really didn't. It's just waiting to be triggered. There's some people you don't see them sad very much. You don't see them angry very much because that's not there to be triggered much um, out of their language, out of their narrative. So your narrative absolutely generates your reality. So if you want to change your reality, you want to change your experience of the world, you need to change your narrative. And what that generally involves is looking at what narrative you do have, and most of it's assessments, not the truth. But again, the assessments that we've held for a long, long time, and we just repeat them over and over again, we tend to hold them as the truth at some point. But I have this with clients all the time. That they'll react and they'll just go off on employees and just chew them out. And it's like, what was that reaction all about? Because that part of your narrative as an entrepreneur, being impatient and jumping people who don't do it your way, is disempowering to you. So how can we look at that in part of your narrative and turn it into something that's more empowering? Because when you jump that employee, guess what? They're not going to want to do their best for you today, or probably for a while. They're probably going to badmouth you behind your back to the other employees, maybe some customers, maybe some vendors. And for damn sure, they're going to go home and tell their family and friends what a jerk you were to them and how you embarrassed them or how you chewed them out. So, and what I get a lot of times is, well, I was just reacting like a normal businessman. Okay, that's a narrative. That's an assessment you have that, quote, a normal businessman would react like that. But let's look at it more from an adult perspective. Do you think the employee tried to, mess up? Do you think they tried to make a mistake? Do you think they wanted you to chew them out? Let's look at things, like I say, from an adult perspective. And when you start looking at it that way, you can start, well, maybe it was just they didn't know and they were trying hard. And really what it is, it's a learning opportunity. You should turn this into a learning opportunity for them and empower them, get them more engaged in your business, get them more engaged in loyalty to you, rather than making them feel bad, rather than making them feel stupid. Is that making any sense?
Yeah, yeah. Now, when you think about how our languages impact and how it impacts the way we think, going back to that idea of the podcast, that I had to think through starting a podcast before I ever did it. I didn't just show up and have it happen. When you think about successful business owners, how are they using their own language, their own natural intuition to help them move things forward and be more successful?
Well, so some common traits of successful entrepreneurs. Number one, they see opportunity where other people see risk. They see opportunities all over the place. In fact, what's hard about working with them is to get them to narrow down the possibilities they're willing to pursue at one time. So they see a lot of opportunity out there. They're also willing to take action, like right now. They're not willing for it to like be perfect or be exactly right. They'll make it up. They'll start taking action, and obstacles come up. They don't allow obstacles to become dead ends. They work their way around them, through them. They figure it out. They get past them. They don't. The example of Thomas Edison. He's supposed to have tried 10,000 ways to make an incandescent bulb until he finally did. And somebody asked him, he's like, "What was it like to endure after failing to invent a light bulb 10,000 times?" And he kind of looked at him kind of funny. He said, "I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just found 10,000 ways not to make the light bulb."
Mm-hmm.
That's a perspective of entrepreneurs, is that they're focused on the results. They're willing to take action, and they're willing to pursue it to the ends of the earth if need be. They're very energetic. They're generally very extroverted. They're very good with people. They can enroll people in what they're all about. Like I say, they're not really good with the rules themselves, so they're not going to look at things. They're going to tend to look at things outside the box a lot. They're not going to, well, the rules say I can't do this, and the social norms I shouldn't do that. And that doesn't restrict them much. They're going to do what needs to be done to achieve the results that they're committed to.
Yeah. Now, you've been doing work with predictive index
Yes.
for a long time. First, kind of give us an overview of that, and then maybe we can talk about the intersection between that and private practices.
Okay. Yeah, predictive index has been around since the 50s. I think something like 50 million people have taken the test. And basically, what it shows you is how you perceive how you're going to show up at work, as well as how you think you're supposed to show up at work as perceived by others. And it looks at four major areas. The first one is, are you more independent and dominant, or are you more of a team player? You're going to be more, you feel better working with a team rather than you have to have things my way. And entrepreneurs are going to be very strong in the my way thing. Next one is, are you extroverted? Like you're good with people, you easily have conversation with people, you make people feel at ease, or you're more reserved and I guess less trusting at first. You need to warm up to get to know people a little bit. And the third is, are you more of a steady worker? Like you want a steady pace and you can do the same thing over and over every day of the week? Like, say, an assembly worker. You know, they do the same thing over and over again. A barista, a lot of service jobs, same thing over and over again. Entrepreneurs are much more comfortable with fast pace. They want to change gears a lot. And in fact, some of them do really well in chaos. They thrive in chaos. And the fourth one is about precision, or are you somebody who needs like guidelines and rules and structure? You want to know exactly what you're supposed to do, exactly what the results are supposed to be, and you're going to be meticulous about accomplishing that. Or entrepreneurs is like, I just figure it out as I go along. You know, I don't hit me with a lot of rules. I don't want to be restricted with that. I'll just figure it out when I get there. So entrepreneurs, again, that's a strong suit for them in one way, and that empowers them to not be bound by, a lot of norms and shoulds and shouldn'ts. At the same time, it has them not very good at following up and keeping up with details. So, there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. And depending on the position, you're going to want to have different emphasis in those traits depending on the position.
Yeah. Now, when you look at kind of typical business owners, typical therapists in private practice, would you guess that probably their predictive index is pretty similar to one another, or do you think that it's probably pretty diverse?
I haven't dealt with a large population of therapists, but I would think that most of them, especially if they're on their own, would be at least a little bit on the independent side. They're not going to want to be an employee at some, mega hospital. I would think that they would be what they call situational. They can be extroverted if the situation calls for it, but they can also be fairly reserved because as a therapist, they're not trying to make friends with their patients, right? They're trying to find out. They're trying to get their patients to talk to them to work through their problems. And on the pace, I would think that they would have to be fairly steady at things. And then on the precision, I guess it depends on what, are they what part of the profession they go to? Is it something that's got a lot of rules, or the kind of free form stuff, free flow stuff? I'd have a hard time saying that about as a generalization, but I would think they would lean a little bit more towards the not so precise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when I think about therapists, the probably introvert extrovert side, they're probably 60-40 in the introvert direction. Looking at chaos versus rules, I think people that are kind of drawn to the counseling world oftentimes have had to follow rules to get licensed and all those sorts of things, and so maybe they started that way but then realized that doesn't always serve them when they're actually in the counseling world running a business and trying to innovate and change.
Right.
As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using Therapy Notes. They make billing, scheduling, note-taking, telehealth, and e-prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. So if you take kind of language and the predictive index, when you think about maybe 3 to 5 actions that people can take to just in general just optimize their brains better, what are some actions that they can take?
Well, number one is you need to pay attention to your narrative because it's always there. A lot of your narrative is just repetitive stuff. It's like tape loops. It's the same thing that goes on all day long, and it's telling you how to react, how to feel. Um, you know, be happy, be sad, be dissatisfied, whatever. Not like a person, like a person. All those kinds of judgments, that happen to us, and we don't realize that it's got us. We don't have it; it has us. And one of the ways to, I guess, intervene on, especially on the parts of your narrative that disempower you, is to number one, recognize it, and number two, ask questions about where does it come from and how can I reinterpret this assessment into something that will empower me. And again, people say, I was thinking, and generally what they're referring to, I was having the same old thoughts. Real thinking happens in questions, right? Because if you're just, quote, having the same old thoughts about what you already know, you're not really thinking. There's no breakthrough there. It's in questions. And again, that's why therapy asks a lot of questions, is to get the person to, reflect on their own actions, their own thoughts, and like, oh yeah, that's some silly stuff I learned as a kid. My dad told me, or my mom told me, or I picked up from school, and I've been living with this suffering out of it, this suffering out of this interpretation part of it. And now I can see that that's just, it's silly stuff. So I'm going to reinterpret that story to one that's going to be more empowering. Am I making any sense here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I'm wondering, you know, Cary, what are some of your just habits that you enact to bring to life some of the things that you've learned about language, about predictive index, about all this kind of self betterment types of things? Like the more that we know who we are, the better we can make changes or improvements. Like for you personally, what does this look like?
Well, I try not to live in a lot of hard and fast answers because in my experience, I always have to be open to the possibility of what don't I see here? What am I missing? Because your narrative is going to have you see a lot of stuff, but it's going to have you miss a lot of stuff. I don't care what your narrative is. You're going to be blind to certain things. You're going to be blind to certain, uh, things of possibilities mainly. So I try not to live in answers much. I'm always looking for what don't I know, and I found that serves me pretty well in most cases because I'll pick up on nuances that say the business owner didn't pick up or whoever didn't pick up on, or they weren't thinking about, like, hey, what about this possibility? It's in those kinds of conversations. What about, what if and what about, that you can innovate a lot, think out of the box, etc. And really, a lot of times, find more effective ways to do things and easier.
Yeah. Now, when I think about therapists, and I think about kind of their daily work, they're dealing with, a lot of clients that maybe think differently than them, maybe the way that they've been raised, their language, their family of origin, all of that. What do you think would be helpful in this conversation in regards to their interaction with their clients?
Again, I'm not a therapist, but I would think therapists would want to ask a lot of questions in terms of, especially the patient, and I call it suffering, where they're not effective, where they're not doing well. Maybe they are actually, quote, suffering depression, anger, whatever issues. But a lot of times it's questioning what is a narrative, why you think that, why do you say that, where does that come from? Getting them to examine the narrative is what's going to allow them to hopefully see it. Oh, that's just some story I made up or some story I took on about whatever, and it's had me suffering, and now I can change it. Because it's in those questions of where does that come from, and you say, well, I, whatever it came from. My mom had locked me in the glove compartment when I was 2, and what if what she meant was, I took it as she meant such and such. What if she really meant this and she was just trying to protect me for some reason? That's more empowering than she was being mean to me. She was being cruel to me and I felt bad about, and again, I'm spitballing some stuff here. Nothing, uh, nothing factual, all hypothetical stuff. But it's in that kinds of conversations with clients to get them to reflect a lot and actually think that they're going to be able to step out of a lot of suffering traps that they set up for themselves. I would think.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, kind of knowing what you know about the brain and how people think, um, what do you wish more of the general public just knew about the brain?
What I wish the general public knew more about the brain.
Yeah, about the brain, about how we think, about language, about our personalities. What do you wish was maybe more common in the national discussions around the brain?
Yeah, I wish people would think for themselves a lot. A lot of people are, the old axiom: whoever controls your perspective controls your reality. So be careful of who controls your perspective. Most people have no idea, number one, that they have a perspective or that they're driven by a narrative of language, but they're willing to tune into the boob tube every night, or their favorite, their own biased set of news, whether it be conservative or liberal, and whatever's told, spoon fed to them, they don't really have genuine opinions. They have talking points that they've been indoctrinated with. And I'm not talking just politics, just life in general, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. There's not a whole lot of reflection on, okay, this is what I learned growing up. Is this like most effective thing for me? Is it most effective for my life in the world and how I interact with other people? In other words, who can I be as a human being that's going to have the biggest impact in my life and in the lives of people around me? How can I become that better person? Rather than a lot of people, and I say this from a wide spectrum, fairly narrow minded, fairly closed minded, fairly opinionated about the way things are, and they think they see the world as it is. And if you don't see it their way, well, you're an idiot. Uh,
Mm,
anyway, I kind of got off tangent there, but yeah, that's what I would want people to do, is to know that basically we've been programmed since birth. With the
mm,
with the amount of data, especially these days, that's thrown at us through the internet. TV. When I was a kid, it was the TV. The old man's called the idiot box or the boob tube. And so now I don't even watch. I haven't watched TV probably about 2.5 years, and I'm very selective about what I watch. Online. Just because I
mm,
know all that stuff, it's going to influence you. To some extent. But most people don't pay attention to, like, they have no discernment about. I don't think I want to watch that. Just a bunch of bloviated talking heads on a news channel.
mhm.
Oh yeah, that's,
Yeah.
well, yeah, and then they start talking like, well, everybody knows, or nobody does that, or all this or all that. It's all the Republicans are all wrong, the Democrats are all wrong, whatever, and it's just a bunch of opinions that they have, but they're speaking them like they're the truth.
Mm. Yeah, so you would say that, really just being aware of just in general where you're getting suggestions, where you're getting influence, where you're taking in and consuming content. That kind of goes back to that language model we talked about at the very beginning.
Exactly. Yeah. I
Mm,
mean, think about it this way. You, like I was mentioning before the show, you and I have some similarities in our narratives, in that we're both men, that we're both from America, but that you're from Minnesota, I'm from Louisiana, is going to show up in terms of different ways that we see the world. Now, so that's just there's a whole lot of, there's some major differences there. But imagine this: let's say you were born in the 1500s in the remote parts of, say, Pakistan, as a woman, as a girl, in a devout Muslim family. You would be a
mhm,
very different person. You would see the world in a very different, totally. You wouldn't recognize the world as you see it now. Does that make sense?
mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to point to. Your circumstance, your surroundings, what you're bombarded with throughout your life is going to dictate your narrative. And especially, well, not just what you bombard, the choices you make about that, the stories you make up about what happens to you, is what's going to determine your narrative.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, Carrie, the last question I always ask is if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
The big thing is to learn to live in questions more, because that's where learning it happens. And for me anyway, the one of the biggest joys of my life is to continue learning uh, throughout life. And so imagine if you're a therapist and you continue to learn, you learn to live in questions more. how much more effective can you be with your patients? How much more effective can you be with your family or your business or in all aspects of life?
Mm. Yeah. Cary, if people want to follow your work, where should we send them?
Probably my website would be best. It's www.strategicbusinessadvisors.us or www.strategicbusinessadvisors.org. There's two websites. You can book an appointment with me, contact me by phone or by email. Happy to talk.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Joe. Enjoy the conversation.
All right, we're talking about the brain. Got lots of great interviews coming up in front of us as well. Also, don't forget about the Group Practice Boss Conference. At the time of this recording, which is a couple months before this goes live, we have about half of our spots left for you to grab. So it's a smaller conference. We want it to be an intimate conference for people that have group practices or that are hoping to have group practices. You can read more over at practiceofthepractice.com/conference. Also, if you can't come, we are going to be live streaming it, so make sure you sign up for your live stream ticket as well. You know, we also couldn't do this show without amazing sponsors like Therapy Notes. Therapy Notes is the best electronic health records out there. They will help you switch over from your current EHR. They also give you 2 months for free or just money off if you use promo code Joe at checkout. They are phenomenal. They help with automated billing. It's going to make it easier to outsource your billing. So many reasons to switch to Therapy Notes. Just head on over to therapynotes.com, read about it, and at checkout, just use promo code Joe. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.